Let's Talk JMMA with Charlie Jewett from sogo-kaku.com. This is a podcast about the deep end of Japanese combat sports scene. I'm your host, Shu Hirata from On the Road Management. Now, let's begin. Hey, good morning.
Good evening. How are you doing?
Good. So we changed our time from this episode. It's morning time in Japan, right?
Yes.
a.m. and 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So
let's see how it goes.
Right. So let's start with the one championship controversy. Now, what do you think about that fight between Ham and?
So when I first watched it, I watched it live, and my initial reaction was I thought that Zamboanga won the fight.
Yeah, I thought so too.
But in hindsight now, I've spoken to some people, and I was looking at how how one scores their fights.
Yeah,
and it's a
fight, right?
Right, they score the entire fight, and I looked. They actually have on their website like what order they weigh things, and so I was surprised to see takedowns are ranked very lowly on their scoring.
Low, yeah. I think the damage is much higher, right? The damage factor.
Damaging, I mean, I have it right up. Damaging was the most important, or no, I'm sorry, getting near, like a near finish is the highest ranked. Then it's damage, and then it's striking combinations and cage generalship. Then it's takedowns, then aggression. And I was actually kind of surprised that takedowns are weighed the same as takedown defense. And so I'm like, oh, well, the entire first round, Ham stopped a takedown because I thought the referee did a poor job and just let them kind of grind on the cage going for a takedown for about 5 minutes.
Right.
So once I looked at that list, I'm like, I could see how one of their judges, their judges would see that Ham won because Ham clearly had the better striking exchanges. She was way more accurate. And Zamboanga just really went for takedowns. Most of them were defended, but when she got them, she really didn't do anything with them.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, even the first round, she pushed Ham against the cage for like 4 minutes.
Right. So, according to one's rules, that's not really that important.
No.
And because I was kind of curious, because after the fight, Zamboanga was upset in the press conference, and Ham Sohi's response was, you should go read the rules, essentially. Have you read the rules? I won under one's rules, which made me kind of curious to go look at it. And I'm like, oh, well, they're scoring. I mean, I think the scoring is kind of weird, to be honest, because if that's the way, then if you essentially drop someone in the first round, you can just kind of play keep away for the rest of the fight and win the fight.
Sure.
But
obviously it gives you an advantage to the strikers, right?
Right. Yeah. And it seems I think the main issue with it is kind of the lack of transparency. That's always the issue with one, because they're like, oh, we'll have our independent panel of 14 judges review it. And people are like, well, wait, what? Who are these judges?
Exactly.
What are the qualifications for them overturning?
Do they ever announce those names of 14 people in the so-called quote-unquote committee?
I don't think so. And a lot of people were kind of just accusing, because Zamboanga seems like she has a lot of fans, especially in the Philippines.
Yeah.
That were very vocal on social media.
Right.
So I think people were saying that's like, oh, if the fans are loud enough, one will try to overturn the results, or they'll pretend to do something, which I think also led to more criticism.
The problem here is that this committee is within the one organization, so it's not like a neutral third party.
Aren't the judges also one employees?
Yes, I mean it can't help it because there's no commissions in the countries that they put at shows at. Most of the country they put shows at. So, and they don't follow so-called Nevada rules, right? So they make their own rules. So bottom line is like a referee, judges, fighters, staff, committee member, everybody's paychecks are signed by charity. Basically. I mean, so.
Right. But it's out of necessity. I will say, though, I think it was the right decision not to overturn it, because Aoki was even saying on Twitter, I think Chris Cyborg was saying on Twitter, it would be a really weird precedent to set.
Right.
If they would go back in and change the results. I mean, even if it'd have to be like a truly terrible, in my mind, I'm thinking like Shogun Machida 1 style decision for me to
Right.
want the commission to come in and overturn it.
It's very hard to overturn the decision, even here too. I mean, unless if it's like a headbutt, you know, like
Yeah.
a referee missed kind of stuff. So you basically, it's kind of impossible, right? To
I think it's better that way too, because once you kind of set the precedent that these decisions can be overturned, it's like after every decision, people are going to be challenging it.
right, yeah. I mean, and the point is, who has the right to challenge it, right? And who has the right
Right.
to take that to the committee? I mean, who
That's a
makes
good point.
that original decision anyway?
That's a
Okay,
good
this
point.
one goes to the committee. If this one doesn't, right? Who makes that decision?
hmm
Yeah.
Plus, I mean, what would it be worth criticizing? Because Chatri said that he thought Zamboanga won before the committee met.
Right.
So, I mean, could that be accused of biasing members of the committee if their boss is saying he thinks it was a bad decision?
Sure, but they didn't at the end, right? So
it was 9-5, so there were 5 people that voted to overturn it.
Right, exactly. But again, I think, it's just not like, again, you said it's a lack of transparency is always a problem there. You know, like nobody really knows about the detail of drug tests and stuff like that too.
Exactly, because I mean, sounds like they're doing some cool stuff. I mean, people like to talk about the hydration test.
Sure.
People like to talk about it. Just show it. Show us it happening,
right,
and it'll make people stop criticizing it.
Okay, we got a comment here. It says they're pride-based, written by Matt Hume, but not quite like Pride. I mean, I think it's almost RIZIN's a little bit similar too, right? Because they fight.
Right.
You have to finish strong because you basically score the entire fight.
But I think the problem with that type of scoring is that average MMA fans are so used to the 10-point scoring system.
Exactly, right. Round by round, right. That's how everybody discusses, right.
So even people will be like, I know this is not 10-point, but I mean, you got to say Zamboanga won the first and second round, so she won the fight. I'm like, well, you have to divorce that thought process. You have to realize it's this who won the fight. Plus, outside of the scoring controversy, I thought the judging was really weird. I mean, not the judging, the refereeing was really weird in this fight. And the headbutt near the end of the fight, that was a lot of blood.
Yes.
And I'm not normally one for stopping a fight, but I mean, when she was on, it looked like Ham was swimming in blood when she was on top of her. And
they had to do a doctor's check if it was that much blood, right? I mean,
well, it was weird. It was like the last round, they essentially give her a 5-minute break as the doctors check the cut. And you can't say that didn't like change the momentum of that round.
Sure.
Or that fight. And I mean, in my opinion, if the cut was that bad, it would almost have been worth stopping it there and just, since it was so late in the round, going to the judges at that point and seeing who was winning to that point.
We discuss the rules. It gets very, very inconsistent, even in the States too. Because let's say if you get hit by groin, how many minutes you're allowed to take, right? Most of the states will say, okay, take it up to 5 minutes. Some states say, okay, take the 5 minutes an entire fight. Meaning, what if you get kicked in the groin twice? Do we have to divide it between 230, 230 kind of stuff?
Exactly.
That's just, I just doesn't, I mean, it makes sense somehow, but it's very hard to keep a track of, how do you administrate that rules? So
Plus,
in one, how long are you allowed to take break on doctor's check?
They didn't say, they weren't saying, but I mean, they gave her several minutes, and up till that point, the momentum of the round was going one way, and after the headbutt, the momentum changed drastically.
Right.
And you got to think that taking a breather for an extended period of time had some effect on that.
And I think it must be hard for judges to score an entire fight because you have to remember what happened the first 2 minutes, opposed to what happened on the last 2 minutes, and people's impression changes too.
Yeah, I would love to see like how they're. I mean, they don't reveal it, so that's just a transparency. Like, how are they scoring this as it goes along? They have like a spreadsheet where it's like, oh, she had a good combination, check, or are they just trying to remember everything? I think I actually read that at the end of the fight, the referees have a discussion, not the judges. The judges kind of have a discussion at the end of the fight to talk about it, is what I read.
Well, I mean, that's after they scored, right?
I do not know.
Because they shouldn't be discussing before they score.
Right.
That's when they have 3 judges,
Exactly.
Right. Yeah, again, I think WMMA scene now just commented again that even the unified rules or anything but I agree, right?
It's a contradiction, wasn't it?
Yeah,
There's like the new unified rules that
all the unified rules, right? Yeah,
exactly.
On
any stupid
rules meaning I always have to ask and make sure. And what's so funny is some of the referees are not even sure too. They go back and ask commission member, right? I mean, because the referee they ref at the different states. So
the stupidest one is what is a downed opponent being different in different jurisdictions.
I wish they just unify the whole thing,
right?
Globally, just like a soccer or baseball, any other sports.
But it's so dated, though. I mean,
right.
if you look through some of the states, like where their MMA rules are and their athletic commissions, half of them are just like tucked away somewhere in their boxing rules.
Mm-hmm.
And like now that they're there, they're never going to change them. It just seems very strange.
So I wish, I mean, some of the things one championship does is very interesting and is good for the sport. So I hope they make, things more transparent and, they try to set a good precedent, right? So maybe North American commissions could take a look at it and say, hey, these guys are doing something very interesting. But
and they have the benefit, I mean, not having the athletic commissions is kind of a benefit to them because it allows them to create a unified product in all of the different regions they go to.
Sure. And actually, if they could be more ambitious in a sense that they could create their own unified rules and all the precise, nice rules and challenge North American commission and says, hey, ours is better.
Yeah.
But now, that's not the way they're going, right?
And I mean, going to Japan doesn't have an athletic commission.
No, exactly, right.
Yeah, so I mean, athletic commissions aren't, I don't want to sound like an anarchist, they aren't that necessary in the grand scheme of things.
Even though I say I wish all, like they have global unified rules, but many Japanese fight fans actually prefer to watch fights in different rules because they actually discuss, right? Like what happens if they fight under this rules and that rules in the cage versus the ring and all kinds of stuff. So
see, I'm going to lean towards that angle because I like the promotions that have different rules.
Yeah.
Because it just creates a different, unique product. Kind of like when Sakakibara said he likes using the ring and having different rules because it differentiates the product of RIZIN.
Exactly. You have to create your unique point, right? You can't all look like UFC.
But speaking of weird rules, do you remember back when one championship essentially was Pride rules and they were allowing soccer kicks?
Yes.
And then they created some weird rule where you could soccer kick, but you had to look to the referee for permission first.
Yeah, I remember that. Right, that's just really funny,
Yeah, and like the whole thought process, I'm like, if you have to look to the referee, like your opponent's already knocked out. Like if you have time to do that, the fight's already over.
I wonder who approved that rules, right? That's what really makes me wonder about who is this 14 members of the committee. Do they really knows their sport?
Yeah.
But anyway, so I hope. But anyways, that the decision didn't get overturned, so they're all gonna fight, and she's gonna get a alternate bout, right? So she may have a chance to get back into the Grand Prix.
I will also insert that I'm actually interviewing most of the winners for this tournament, and something that I hadn't thought about before I spoke to some of them was, so I spoke to Stamp, and she went and did this fight, and now she's back in Thailand, and she has to do a 2-week quarantine in Thailand in a hotel room. I mean, it's not like in a hotel room. She's not allowed to leave her hotel room. So this tournament's kind of weird in that you go fight, then you come back, and you're not really given a lot of time to prepare for the next round because you're spending most of the time quarantining.
Exactly. And on top of that, who knows what happened with the Singapore government, right, when it comes to COVID. So they could all of a sudden postpone the show.
Yeah, I was almost kind of surprised that one championship didn't try to do something where they kept the fighters in Singapore. Kind of like how Deep's been doing with Siwoo Park.
Right. But again, that's actually, they're hard to predict what's going on, right? So
exactly.
They could end up like holding the fighters there for months. So
that's true. Kind of like that, the Olympic, the Sudanese Olympic team that was stuck in Japan for like 2 years.
Exactly. Right. But remember, this is a 10th year anniversary for one championship. And I always heard the word that they were planning on big 10th anniversary shows, maybe in September, maybe in October, maybe in the beginning of November kind of stuff. But they can't really nail down because, unfortunately, because of this COVID. Right? So I wonder what will happen,
Yeah. But also with the tournament, did you watch? I thought some of the fights were pretty good.
Yes.
And I was the Ritu Fogat. I was completely surprised when she beat Ming Bo.
Mm-hmm.
I think Ming Bo kind of emptied the tank and tried to finish her in the first round, and then got exhausted.
Right. I think she ran out of gas.
Mm-hmm. It's kind of interesting because I think Itsuki is the only fight where the favorite won. All of the underdogs won every other fight in the tournament because Sohee came into it ranked 5, and I think Boango was ranked 2 or 1.
Right. And actually, we weren't going to talk about this, but I guess Itsuki's boyfriend, Asa Yamamoto, was on her corner, and I guess some of the instruction he gave during the fight, and Aoki, who was commentating on ABEMA broadcast, that criticized and basically said the completely opposite. You know?
I will say that I had the pleasure of watching this on ABEMA TV, and whatever you say about Aoki as a person, his commentary is absolutely hilarious because he doesn't care. He just doesn't care. Like during the Meng Bo Ritu Fogat fight, he was like, this is kind of like a low level, low skill wise, just kind of endurance battle. He just like calls it as he sees it. And it was just pretty funny. Like, I think there are things that the commentators weren't supposed to talk about. Like most promotions don't like it when you talk about like other promotions and things like that.
But he
was just with Sohee came on. He was like giving like a women's MMA history lesson, talking about Smack Girl and Valkyrie and all the different promotions. So,
but you're not supposed to, though, right? Because I heard that one sort of instructed to the media to not mention certain promotions, right?
Right, exactly.
Yeah, so, but Aoki doesn't care, right?
No, not at all. Yeah. I mean, this is the guy that once wrote in a blog post essentially that ONE FC failed in Japan. And then he had to redact it and say that he never said that. But I'm glad you brought up Itsuki because I wanted to say it, but I had forgotten. Before this event aired on ABEMA TV, the lead-in video was all Itsuki. Oh, it was like a giant. I think it was probably like it showed all of her fights up to that point, and the giant thumbnail image was of Itsuki. So I mean, she's definitely the girl ABEMA is promoting.
Oh yeah, of course, right, obvious.
Vivi May was on the card, but it was just like,
no one cared.
The Itsuki show.
Well, I mean, she's relatively good looking, and the record is clean. Young.
Plus, she's a product of the reality show, like fighting agent wars, whatever they call it.
It only makes sense for ABEMA to push her. But I wish she gets a better coach because, come on, face it, Asa Yamamoto is not a proven coach. He's not a proven fighter. He's like 3-5, and he's only fighting RIZIN because of his daddy. I mean the mummies and uncle's name, right? So
that just makes me laugh because it reminds me of he received a lot of criticism of the RIZIN confession video where he was like kind of yelling at Miyu about what she should have done during the Ayaka Hamasaki fight, and people are just kind of like laughing, like, "Are you qualified to be talking about this?"
He tells her what to do.
Yeah,
I mean, he should really go back to the prosciutto pancreas and start from scratch almost.
He should. Maybe his mom should be cornering him and not the other way around.
Right. And I think if ABEMA really want to push her, if I were ABEMA, I would suggest Itsuki to find a team in the States.
Right. Or I mean,
out of there. Yeah, and he doesn't have to go.
Not to talk like a bunch of crap or anything, but I mean, Crazy B's kind of been having some problems recently.
Exactly. Right.
And it wouldn't. I mean, if you were a serious fighter, I mean, you want to try high level. I mean, Triforce or someplace like that would probably be a better fit, or at least go to the U.S. She seems really into U.S. culture. If you follow her on Instagram and Twitter,
especially for women, it's obvious that it's just better, right?
Yeah.
Right. So let's talk about next topic, which is the big news in both the U.S. and Japan, which is Mr. Kyoji Horiguchi signing with Bellator.
Yes.
Now, let me ask you this. You remember day before this was announced, Kyoji and Dan Lambert went on some podcast and talked about his free agent and blah, blah, blah.
Right.
I revealed this, that when I saw that, I immediately contacted RIZIN because we were told that, the winner of the Grand Prix will fight Horiguchi next year.
Right.
So I'm like, hey.
The whole build up to the tournament.
Right. Hey, what's going on? And they're like, dude, shoot, this is already a done deal. We have a press conference scheduled. I don't know why this podcast is like doing what's going on right now, So this was done deal before
Right.
that podcast went out. So
I spoke to some guys at the We Are Rising podcast yesterday,
okay.
and they said that Dan Lambert comes from a pro wrestling background.
Yeah, well, yeah.
And
Okay.
that they think that this is just like his pro wrestling style antics of trying to generate interest. Because I mean, he was even putting a poll on Twitter, like, where should Kyoji fight next?
Right.
And my thought process is, I think Japanese fans are generally happy he's going to Bellator. I just think they were kind of confused about that podcast.
Right. And I think they're generally happy to hear that the Bellator is willing to let Horiguchi fight maybe once a year in RIZIN, right?
Yeah, and I would now say Bellator has done a great job of creating a lot of goodwill in Japan.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I didn't think that it would be as successful as it was, but the co-promoted show really endeared them to a lot of Japanese fans. And Kana Watanabe going over there and winning her first fight also kind of built their stock up.
Right. So, and Scott mentioned about hoping to do another Bellator Japan show, right, in the future.
Also, I mean, I wasn't surprised when I heard he was a free agent. Bellator was one of the first. I was like, it's either Bellator or PFL, because the UFC hasn't changed. They're not going to pay him what he wants.
No, and the PFL has only 145 and up. So
yeah, and he was already the Bellator champion. And when he was the Bellator champion, it seemed at that time he was talking about going back to Bellator to defend his Bellator belt.
Right, because he did not really actually lose that title. Right.
Right. Exactly. It seemed like he was more interested in Bellator.
Mm-hmm.
And now with the pandemic, just makes more sense for him to fight in the United States.
Yeah, because he applied for the green card, so if he has to stay in the States, and it is no sense just sitting around and wait for the Japan's pandemic is over. So it only makes sense for him to sign with the North American promotion, you know?
Yeah.
That's not surprise at all, you know?
I mean, I think Bellator is going to pay him. He's going to make some money. And
I mean, we all know the Bellator pays way more than the UFC does to the Sun fighters. Right?
Yeah, it just depends who you are. And
right.
Bellator has an interest in Japanese fighters, and they're going to pay them more than Kyoji would have made in the UFC. So it makes a lot of sense to me.
Way more. I mean, I'm sure we'll find out sooner or later, but it's always like that with the Bellator, you know?
Plus, RIZIN gets to do the Japanese MMA thing where it's, RIZIN champion fighting in Bellator.
Right.
So they can tie their name to everything he does.
Right. And a good thing about it is this, they're going to do Bantamweight Grand Prix maybe, right? $1 million for the winner, and Kyoji will be in the tournament, obviously. And could win that, but he could, if he loses that, he could always go back to Japan and defend his RIZIN title.
It's also a great move by Bellator because, I mean, they want to be in the Japanese market.
Mm-hmm.
And if they have arguably the best Japanese fighter at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, they could go back in and easily use him to headline a card, especially if he's the champion at that point.
Exactly. But here's what it is, though. As the management of Naoki Inoue, who I'm hoping for him to win the Grand Prix, you know, of course, obviously, we would be like, when can we fight Horiguchi again, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not again, but when can we challenge Horiguchi? Then I was thinking, if Bellator is doing Bantamweight Grand Prix next year, they have to start around April, right? Or June, whatever. I mean, and we were told, actually, if he wins the Grand Prix, will you challenge in Horiguchi maybe around April? So I don't think this is going to happen, to tell the truth.
Yeah, that's also a thought I have lingering in the back of my head.
Yeah.
Just kind of the different nature of the press releases.
Right.
Was that RIZIN's press release was like, oh, it's going to be a shared thing. You can fight in Japan once a year. And Bellator was like, we signed Kyoji Horiguchi.
Right.
There wasn't any mention of RIZIN in the rest of the press release.
Obviously, Bantamweight's a stack there right now. And they were talking about the Bantamweight Grand Prix. So my actually gut feeling is that even though RIZIN said, oh, Kyoji can fight, you know, once in a while in Japan, but in terms of year 2022, I don't think Horiguchi will have a room to fight, a time to fight in Japan.
It's funny you're saying these are all thoughts I was having. I'm like, well, that's interesting. Fighters can't fight every month, so who's going to have priority in this relationship?
They're not like artists who play rock and roll, right? Go back to Japan and play, and come back and play. It's not like that. You know?
Nope. Like, who's going to have priority? Is Bellator going to want him to come fight over here if he wins the championship?
Exactly. I mean, if it's $1 million at the stake, and obviously the RIZIN will never pay him $1 million per fight, so of course your choice is clear, right? So right now, I think this is the devastating blow for Mr. Naoki Inoue's management, myself, that I don't think even though he wins the Grand Prix, he's going to get to challenge Horiguchi.
It's funny you're saying all this because my theory that I was talking about yesterday as well was just that this seems like a thing that RIZIN is doing to save face almost, where it's one of their most highly ranked fighters is leaving for Bellator,
right?
But instead of saying that, and then last year they had Ham Sohei leaving for one championship.
Manel Cave left for
Iri Prohacha. I can never say his name. So like this is just them trying to say like, oh no, he's not leaving. It's a shared deal where he'll fight for us once every year. But I mean, is that actually going to happen? It's to be seen.
However, yeah, I mean, obviously that they have a very good relationship with Scott Coker, right? So, and if he ended up in the UFC, all the fans would be like, he's never gonna fight for Japan, right? Until he gets released from the UFC or something. But in Bellator, you can at least leave a hope. You know?
I will say though, I think Bellator is an interesting option now because I think because of the talent pool in Bellator, it's kind of easier to do well. It's not as easy, but it's more realistic to do well in Bellator for Horiguchi. And so he has more potential, and that would make him more famous in Japan.
Sure.
As well.
So I think this is a real interesting thing about Kyoji. It seems like almost every fans love Kyoji. Because before this was announced, a lot of people did the polls, took a survey, and almost everybody, like 80% of people said like they all want him to sign with the UFC. You know, because they really want him to go for the best of the best. But now was this announced? But like nobody's really voicing disappointment. Everybody's saying like any decision Kyoji makes has to be the right one.
The only stuff. It's not even him. They love his coach. Like they think his coach is a genius.
Right, Mike Brown. Right.
But I always would say that the only criticism I saw was in the podcast and how it was announced because it was just confusing. But I think all the Japanese fans are happy that he's going to Bellator.
I think so too, right? I mean, only very handful of few says like, I wish he tries in UFC and blah blah blah. But still, you know, he can make moves in Bellator and he can always be a champion Bellator. Maybe after he could go to UFC after that, blah blah blah. You know, kind of stuff.
Do you think some of that feeling though is that there's like a general feeling that he gave up the US market, like he gave up the UFC to come over to RIZIN and kind of help carry the promotion?
Right, but you know, at the end of the day, these guys are pro athletes, right? And their careers are very short, and they have to earn money within that span. And the money UFC was offering to the flyweights back then was really not peanuts compared to what RIZIN, Bellator.
It was almost embarrassing, the Horiguchi money.
Yeah,
and then I think was it reported that the news was essentially, you don't speak English, you don't sell tickets, we're not going to offer you more money.
Well, here's what it is. If somebody tells me, oh, you don't speak English, blah, 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 all right, we can't sell tickets because you don't sell English, I always tell the UFC people that, well, that means you're telling that compared to Major League Baseball or any other major sports, your PR or sales force sucks, right? Because that's the bottom line. Because look at Shohei Ohtani. Does he speak English? Look at Ichiro. I mean, fans look at the performances.
Yeah, I mean, it's not that hard too. They can learn. Like look at Machida. Like back when Machida couldn't speak English, he's like, "I am the dragon," or whatever he said, and everybody loved him. Like, exactly. It doesn't matter.
Right. It's not about how you smoothly speak English, right? I mean,
Weili Zhang goes up there and puts together some English she's been studying, and everybody loves it.
When you look at any of the sports, right? I mean, there are athletes who doesn't speak English who's very, popular in the States. So
plus, you always need those fighters on the card that just give solid performances. Yep, you can't have 20 Conor McGregors on a card, or else it just gets exhausting.
No. Right, exactly. So I guess overall, this is a good thing, for Horiguchi and Japanese MMA, and of course, it comes to the RIZIN 30, which is on Fuji Television now.
Yes, is it locally on Fuji TV?
Yeah, actually, it's on Kanto area, which means Tokyo and around. It's like 6 prefectures.
But it's about the biggest area in Japan.
Yeah, it's a big story in Japan because it's on Fuji Television. It's Fuji Television, but it's like 12:45 midnight.
Yes.
Yeah. So, are you gonna stay up and watch this?
I'm going to it. I will be at the stadium.
Right, but oh yeah, that's right. Nah, okay. So look at this Look,
That's the RIZIN 26.
Oh, that's RIZIN 26. Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, sorry, got the wrong one up. But anyway, yeah. Okay, yeah.
So what happens when you go to the RIZIN English page? They see
Yeah,
that they're updating it quickly.
Yeah, right. This is too slow on updating. But anyway, so I think the fight everybody's talking about, the last two fights
Mm-hmm. Yes.
in RIZIN, which is Kaya Sakura against Yamaniha, also Naoki against Kintaro.
Yes.
Now,
At least as far as the tournament goes, those are the two that everyone has their eyes on.
And looks like almost everybody's predicting Kai and Inoue to win.
I'm going to agree with Ogikubo and say that anyone that fought on the Tokyo event is going to beat anyone from the Osaka event.
Yeah, I think so too. Right. I mean, I think there's a clear little difference there,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Creative matchmaking.
Right. And what do you think about Hamasaki against Fujino?
It's great. They released a RIZIN Confessions video yesterday where they kind of go over the history of the two. And they talk about how 10 years ago they fought in an empty Differ Ariake arena, and just how they both kind of suffered through and persevered through when women's MMA was very unpopular. And it's nice to see these people that have persevered get the reward and fight on a giant stage.
Sure. I mean,
I will say that.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
I think Emi Fujino is a little more physically shot than Ayaka Hamasaki.
Oh, yes.
I think she has had some major knee issues last year. But the interesting thing is Emi Fujino has only been stopped by like cuts, and she's never been knocked out. She's never been submitted. And I think Ayaka is really going to try to do one of those. So it should be an interesting fight.
I think so too. But one thing I'm concerned about Amy is that she's tough. She's physically up there. But from my point of view, she hasn't really improved her skill set in like last 10 years. She's been fighting in the same style.
She's really tough, and she kind of moves awkwardly. And she kind of bum rushes forward.
Right.
I would describe her style as like, I'm strong. But I don't think Emi, while not getting finished herself, also really isn't a finisher either.
Right. That's true.
So,
well, this will be also available in the States. So for the fans in North America, you could also watch this live.
Yeah. I also thought it was funny that they spelled her name wrong on the poster.
Oh, they did? Oh my God, that's bad.
I think they fixed it, but the first series of posters had her name spelled wrong.
Oh God! I mean, they have to be careful with things like that. It should be easy, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Right. All right. So next topic I really want to talk about is this one. Which is like anyone talking about this in the States?
I haven't noticed anybody talking about this because I think it was only kind of loosely reported in Japan and obviously on the YouTube video. Right. But I haven't seen anyone talk about it in the States.
Okay. For people who doesn't know anything about it, Mr. Yoshihiro Akiyama posted a video with a ex-baseball player named Mr. Kiyohara on his YouTube channels and also Mr. Kiyohara's YouTube channels. And he basically
wasn't this guy also his cornerman?
Yes, Mr. Kiyohara, baseball player, was also his cornerman on a fight against Sakuraba. I think for the new MMA fans who doesn't know, what happened was Akiyama put lotions all over his body prior to the fight, and Sakuraba couldn't grab his leg at all, and it was too slippery, and he was complaining throughout the fight, but the referee kind of ignored the whole thing, and Akiyama ended up beating him up, right, and landed like 105 pounds, and while Sakuraba was taking shot, he was complaining about how he's slippery and blah blah blah. Now, to make a long story short, first Akiyama denied everything. He said I perspire too much, or I have too extra dry skin, blah blah blah. But at the end of the day, TBS crew was shooting the whole thing. They found the footage of him putting lotions all over the body. So he basically got banned, right, from K1 related event. His 100% of purse was taken away, blah blah blah. But
the event also, I read some of the sponsors. People were upset. Some of the sponsors pulled out and stopped sponsoring K1 over this.
Exactly, and he was heavily criticized, because this is a clear cheating. But he never really came to the public and apologized and blah blah blah. But 15 years later, a couple of weeks ago, he posted this YouTube video with a ex-baseball player, confessing that it's 100% his fault, that he had intention to cheat and blah, blah, blah. But the problem here is then what he does, instead of try to apologize to Mr. Sakuraba, he apologized to first his younger sister. Because back then, when this happened, the younger sister was bullied in school because of it. She went through a lot of hardship because blah, 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 blah. Then, second, he apologized to his mother. Because, of course, she went through hardship and blah, 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 blah.
Wait. Isn't there like a whole story, though, about how his mother helped him cheat in judo?
Yeah, exactly. Let's get into that. So, for English listeners of our shows who doesn't know about this Akiyama, he always had a problem in judo years too. In 2003, April 16th, which is the National Judo Championship final, Akiyama faced this 1996 Atlanta Olympic gold medal winner, Kenzo Nakamura. But in 13 seconds, he won by Harai Goshi, which is the Kenzo win for the throw, but it was very slippery, so he slipped and he lost. So Kenzo was complaining big time. So that was just only in the beginning. On the same year, on September 19th, on the World Championship, Akiyama, all of his opponents before the semifinal, opponent from France, opponent from Mongolia, opponent from Turkey, complained that his judo gi is slippery. So International Judo Federation made him change the gi before the semifinal. So he had to wear this generic gi to compete, and since then he hasn't won a single bout.
Yeah,
and that's a controversy, right?
Oh yeah, it'd be huge because I think people forget. Younger fans may not remember. Like he was not well liked in Japan. He was like hated almost, especially after the Sakuraba fight.
Right.
And I think he also leaned into it. I think he liked being hated almost.
Yeah.
It's kind of a weird thing going on. But I was just confused. Why do you think he's come out now? Like it's so long after the event.
Right. But then right after that, Abema announced that there's a show called Road to One FC produced by Akiyama. But I don't think that was like intent to be that way. I don't know why he did that. And the fact he teamed up with this Mr. Kiyohara, which is a baseball player who got busted by heroin. Right? So, I mean, this is a guy who's sort of banned from national television. He cannot be on the TV anymore.
I mean, my most basic thought is that they're trying to build up their YouTube pages.
Well, bad move, right? Because it's not like he's getting huge viewership right now. And did you see the comments? Almost 99% is a very negative comment.
Yeah.
Everybody's criticizing him.
It seems weird to me because, I mean, Akiyama's famous in South Korea. He's not liked in South Korea. Why would they try to do this stuff in Japan where he's widely disliked?
Right. But here's what it is, though. Akiyama actually has a wife who is a supermodel in Japan. And also Akiyama's little baby, the daughter, is actually a celebrity in South Korea.
Yeah, she has her own. I think she had her own TV show where like famous people like Girls' Generation would come visit her.
Exactly. So Akiyama is actually a nationally known, recognized name in South Korea. So I think in South Korea he's protected in a way because he's not criticized for any problem. And when something happens in Japan, they always make a big deal about the Japan-Korea thing.
Yeah. Well, this is like kind of my criticism with One Championship is a lot of their marketing is very shallow. And I'm like, if you looked into it, you would realize that Akiyama isn't popular in Japan. No. You shouldn't be using him to promote a Japanese TV show.
Right, exactly. And he's opposite of what Juan is pushing. Juan is pushing about the honor, right? Respect. But that doesn't apply to the guy who cheats. Constantly.
Yeah, and I was just like, you have fighters like Ham, who, while Korean's popular in Japan, why aren't you putting her in these Japanese Instagram and Twitter posts and everything?
Exactly.
And Akiyama should be used to market them in South Korea, not in Japan.
Right. Oh, and anyway, to add to this mother issue, remember you just said that his mother used to, help him cheat. Well, she did. Even Akiyama himself admitted on that same year, he went on a Japanese TV variety show called Junk Sports. And he himself says that my mom uses softener called humming. And we don't dry, we don't, what do you do? You don't really dry that and let it naturally dry. So when you wear that and you're still using it, and the softener comes out to the surface of your gi and it gets slippery.
Do on it somewhat related, do you remember a couple of like 5 to 10 years ago when a bunch of UFC fighters, not a bunch, but every once in a while when they were fighting a grappler, you'd find out that they had taken a bath in lotion, like let the lotion go into the skin. I think was the famous Paul Harris fight where Paul Harris complained to the referee and got knocked out as he was complaining.
Right. I mean, I'm not going to name names because we can't prove it, but one of our clients fought one big name American guy in Strike Force, and he lost. The first word he came out was very slippery. And I checked his hand and everything else. There was obviously a little oil on it. But, you can't prove it,
Because I think I may be wrong. I think it was some fighters from Jackson's camp maybe were being accused of bathing in like this weird lotion the night before fights. Because then when they would sweat, it would come out or something.
Exactly, right. But again, about this judogi stuff, the softener thing, actually, the Akiyama is not the only one. I know a lot of judo players from several countries who has done that. So this is a part of like a, between the rules, you can't really bust kind of thing, I
mean, is it the old adage, if you're not cheating, you're not trying?
I guess so. So, I mean, so on judo use is okay. But let me tell you, I know your story. I can tell this listeners that the night when Sakuraba fought Akiyama, and after he got beat up and he's complaining in the ring, this smells like a lotion. It smells like a beaches in Hawaii. It smells sweet. What's going on, right? And this is a true story. I verified that Sakuraba. After the fight, he went to the backstage, immediately complained to the judge, smell my hands. Smell my hands. It smells sweet. First judge smelled his hand. I have a stuffed nose, so I can't smell it. So Sakuraba went to the second judge. Can you smell my hands? The second judge says, oh, I have a stuffed nose today. I can't smell it. So he went to the third judge. He's like, hey, dude, smell it. You know what? Third judge said the same thing. Oh, I have a stuffed nose. So what Sakuraba did was he went to the smoking section, sat down and lit a cigarette. Heavy smoker, right? He's a guy who's
famous for smoking.
Exactly. So he was smoking cigarette, right? He smokes it to calm himself down. And one of the doctor came to him and said, like, hey, dude, you should go to the doctor's check and ice your, head and everything else. So Sakuraba goes, hey, listen, smell my hands. It smells sweet, smells like lotion, right? So this doctor smelled his hand. And he didn't have a stuffed nose. And the doctor says, I can only smell cigarette. So, it's hilarious. But anyway,
destroy the evidence.
Right. But Charlie, there's an additional story to it. So Sakura was all pissed off, but he had to go home. Packed everything. At the very end of the day, he found this one referee, the youngest out of all the referees. And he asked the same question again. Can you smell my hands? And you know what this referee said? I want you to not tell this to anyone that I told you this. Secret. But yes, it does smell like lotion. That was the exact word from the youngest referee. So, I mean, and I think for the listeners who maybe doesn't know this, but this is the year after Sakuraba signed with K1, left Pride, right? So TBS and K1 wanted to make Akiyama star. So they really want Akiyama to win, to beat the Pride star. So they can set up
the Olympic gold medalist to win.
Exactly. K1 Heroes stars are tougher than Pride star Sakuraba. But I guess that didn't work, right? So
I mean, this fight was a huge production. I mean, remember the entrances alone? It was like Akiyama came out with like 50 people. It was just like
but let me tell you another story. That fight, like remember Akiyama was wearing gi, right? Mm-hmm. Entrance. So before he entered the ring, nobody checked his body because he was wearing gi. Yeah. Right? Mm-hmm. He walked in, they did the call, ring announcer announced it. He was wearing gi. He took off gi right before the fight. Now, then I had the questions like, what was the rules? Like, did you know that he was going to wear a gi? Was not wear a gi for the fight? Back in early Japanese MMA, nobody really cared. So even Sakuraba himself didn't know. He didn't even bother to ask, oh, is this guy going to wear a gi or not wear a gi? So,
a big deal,
yeah, exactly. So he's not, Sakuraba himself didn't care, so he didn't ask, so he's not complaining. But when you really look back, You know, like this
Yeah,
is something that
sketchy.
you're supposed to decide right before the fight.
Mm-hmm.
Now, just so you know, just because this happened, the Japanese now MMA is super strict about lotions and checking and
Right.
everything. You know,
I think didn't Rising and Deep Jewels are just now Vaselining fighters' faces before the
exactly.
fights. Mm-hmm.
Because back then you weren't even allowed to use Vaseline because because
Yeah.
of Akiyama. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to name names here, but there are certain technique to stop the bleeding without a Vaseline.
Mm-hmm.
And one of my clients, corner, didn't know the technique. So we had to ask another famous cut man, hey, dude, can you teach me how? Of course, he came back and said, I won't say how much, but okay, you have to pay me this much. I'll teach you.
Yep.
So
Interesting.
this happened a lot in Japanese MMA. But now recently they're still using Vaseline. But not
Right.
the cornerman, only the referee, sub-referee on the ring side or cage side are allowed to put it.
Right.
Cornerman not allowed, right? And the funny thing is this, like even in America, UFC and everything else, once you put a gloves on, that's it, right? You sign by commissions. You always have a gloves on, ready to go fight, go walk out. But in the Japanese MMA, same thing. You sign everything else. However, right before you walk out, you all have to take out gloves one more time to check.
Ah,
Because this is where Akiyama cheated. They did the check on gloves and everything else. But what happened to the Japanese MMA? They take you to the backstage before the walkout with a huge stage and everything else. You can sit there for about at least a fight worth. So what do you do? You have a time where no inspectors, like not real judges are there. You can pretty much do anything. But not like that anymore.
I suck. Wasn't Akiyama also accused of like putting something in his gloves?
Yeah, nobody proved that, but yes, because
There's like accusations.
Right.
Yeah.
The right gloves looks much bigger, and he had this same kind of scar on the finger the next day. But you can never prove that. And
Yeah, exactly.
people are pointing out that he was only throwing right punch instead of left,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but that's just only a rumor, so we can't really get into that so much, right?
It's too bad too, because I mean, he's such a naturally gifted athlete.
Exactly, that's the point. It's kind of embarrassing. He could win without cheating.
Right.
Right.
Because I mean, he put on some crazy performances in the UFC during his time there.
Exactly. But the problem here is this: the UFC probably signed Akiyama thinking he'll be like a big star in Japan. Good. Think to penetrate into the Japanese market. They were wrong about that.
Mm-hmm.
He did not make any noise, and actually, in fact, it was a negative thing.
I think one championship did the same thing.
So but again, it's not like he's kicked out for life or anything like that, and I'm pretty sure he'll fight sometime soon, right?
Just seems weird to bring it up when you're 46 years old.
Right, 15 years later, what's the point,
Yeah.
I mean, is no point. But anyway, so let's get to the real quick next two subjects. Satoshi Ishii in K1, which is a lot of people don't know about this, but Mr. Satoshi Ishii, judo gold medal winner, who fought in World Series of Fighting and all this stuff.
Fellow gold medalist. Not as widely disliked as Akiyama, but not liked in Japan generally.
No, not generally, not at all. But in a way, he gets respect from the fellow fighters though, because he keeps on fighting. He's very active. Right. He fights on Peak, he fights on RIZIN, he fights on like a Russia show, it's K1. So
isn't he technically a Croatian citizen now?
I think so. Didn't he marry some Croatian girl? And I think he's divorced now or something like that. I'm hearing all kinds of rumors, which I don't know,
I just know if you follow him on social media, it seems like he's really good friends with Mirko Krokop and spends most of his time in Croatia training with him.
Right.
Maybe a little too much. Now he thinks he's a K1 fighter.
And he's fighting this fighter who used to be a judo fighter, but he's been fighting K1, kickboxing since 2017, I think. So he had like 33 fights. So he's not like novice. So this is going to be an interesting one because, Satoshi could get knocked out.
Well, I mean, it's not like Satoshi has an iron jaw. He's been knocked out several times throughout his career.
Right.
And especially at heavyweight, any punch can knock someone out. So I thought it was kind of a confusing move myself.
It is a confusing move. And what makes me wonder is that, he fought for the promotion like Heat. It's not like they pay big money. So why is he not fighting for RIZIN, which is obviously the promotion in Japan that pays the best?
Yeah, I mean, he fought. What's his last fight for them? The Fedor fight?
I think so. It was quite a long time ago.
Right. Maybe I think you think RIZIN's probably just interested in fighters that they can market. And Satoshi Ishii has made comments. It's not like anything like Akiyama, but I think he just comes across kind of sometimes general public thinks he's stupid or something like that, and he's just not popular.
But he would be a perfect guy to put up against like guy like Sudario Tsuyoshi.
That's a good point. He would be the perfect opponent for him because he's a legitimate martial artist.
Right, and almost like a judo versus sumo angle, and and both are nationally recognized names, so it has to score a decent viewership in Japan. So actually, this is a big wonder for me that why like Satoshi's really like going around all kinds of promotion. Maybe he's demanding only one fight deal, doesn't want to commit, whatever. But I think for a Japanese MMA fan, he's something interesting,
Yeah, because I'm just he's not. I can't imagine he's extremely wealthy because Olympic athletes don't get paid that much to win in Japan.
And he's not really allowed to associate with the Japanese judo anymore. So it's not like he teaches the gym or do his judo seminar and stuff, right?
And it's also not like he has sponsorships or anything.
Exactly. So it makes me wonder, Now I want to touch real quickly about this kid named Patrick Usami, which is a lot of people in probably States doesn't know much about him, but he's the 21 years old ex-boxer who got picked up from the Abema's TV show called Kakuto Dreamers, right? And he will be making a debut in Shooto. And this Patrick Usami kid is actually half Canadian, half Japanese. And he's actually known for winning nationals, inter high school, and selected nationals, which is a big events in Japan, twice, one back to back in all three. So they call him like 6 crown winner.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah,
he was considered to be one of the favorites to compete for Japan in the Olympics.
Right.
But he got defeated in qualifying.
Yes, he was defeated in qualifier. So he gave up. He couldn't go to the Olympics. So so I guess he found the Kakuto Dreamer. And now this show is pretty interesting. Now, if you win this Kakuto Dreamer, you're assigned under the company called EX Fight and LDH Martial Arts, which we talked about. LDH, Love, Dance, and Happiness, which is a big entertainment company. So he's their full-time employee, probably getting a maybe salary, so he can concentrate on training all day long, all year long. So this is something kind of interesting.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting. I mean, it makes sense now he's going to Shooto, and that makes sense because of the Abema TV connection.
Right. Abema. Also, Shooto is basically like the minor league of the one championship now. I mean, they have a big one logo on the canvas. So,
and Shooto has a really long history of developing up-and-coming fighters. Shooto is essentially like for a long time played the role as a giant amateur league throughout Japan.
Oh, I think still this day the amateur shows, Shooto is the best, right? I mean, and I think they have amateur shows all over the part of the Japan. And right now, I don't think they even charge admission. I mean, like a participation fee, none of that. So it's really amazing in a sense, especially remote part of the Japan. All the Shooto promoters or supporters are super passionate. They're all like sort of like a volunteer, like they try to make things happen. So they do produce pretty interesting amateur fighters,
And I'll say, I'm trying to go through as just like a general research project and put together all of the women's fights that have happened in Japan forever. And Shooto is the most annoying because they have like 30 to 40 events a year.
Right.
Half of them are like not reported events that happened like in some gymnasium in northern Japan. And you're just trying to figure out what went on.
You know what? This is what it is. Remember, back in Shooto, they were not unified rules. Remember, they had the knockdown rules, the referee stops and do the 10 counts and stuff like that. So Shooto was like a shoot boxing and kickboxing world, which is their own sport. So Shooto, when you really think about technically, Shooto is really not a promotion. It's not even a company. It's just a federation. It's a philosophy and idea. So it used to be called a sport called Shooto. But since they changed the cage and now unified rules, so they became a so-called MMA promotion. So, you know.
Plus, I mean, people would be surprised if you look at a bunch of your favorite fighters from Japan. A lot of their first fights were in Shooto.
Exactly.
So,
Actually, when you really look at that, I didn't take any statistic or anything like that. I'm pretty sure almost all Japanese fighters in UFC, I think that fighter who came from Shooto has the best record.
yeah, it's kind of crazy too, because as part of my project, you're just like, oh, I didn't realize that Ayaka Hamasaki, Kana Asakura, Ayaka Miura, all their first fights were in Shooto.
Right. Exactly.
It's kind of this weird thing where they all have their first fight with Shooto and then they sign with somebody else.
Yeah, because unfortunately today's Shooto, the pays are probably lowest among the feeder shows. And even the it's a feeder show, but still they try to sign fighter to this contract that once you became a champion, you won't be able to leave the promotion for 1 whole year, kind of stuff. So, of course, fighter leaves, right? If you're like that, yeah. So it's unfortunate. But anyway, I'm pretty interested in this kid Patrick Usami, see what he's gonna do. You know?
Yeah, he won by a pretty quick knockout in his first fight, right?
But this is my I know I don't want to be negative, but sometimes when you put fighter into this full-time situation, when you get a salary, you don't have to worry about it. You know, you lose your sense of urgency. You know?
Also, I will say, there is sometimes that I've noticed like a weird thing that happens when you take someone like him, who's a really good boxer, or like a really good judo, or like a really good wrestler, and they just start crushing these other amateurs. Because I mean, yeah, they're an amateur MMA fighter, but they have 15 years boxing experience.
Exactly, right.
So of course they're going to have an edge. And the question is like, do they evolve in the areas they need to evolve? Do they, or do they just crush all these amateurs, and then once they get to higher competition, get destroyed themselves because they never made the growth that they needed to make?
Exactly. I mean, basically in MMA, you have so many skills you have to learn. And every boxers who tried MMA training said it's the hardest because it's just as simply you have so many things to learn, you know?
Right, because I mean, you can see it on the Rising 30 card with the Ota versus Kubo.
Right.
I was kind of laughing because Kubo has been training with Miyata, a former Olympic wrestler, but I'm like, he could train with Miyata for 5 years and he's still not going to stop Ota's takedown.
No, it's never going to happen. You cannot fight in a wrestling game, right? I think
exactly.
His game has to be the striker who just can't be taken down.
Yeah, just run away. Like literally run away. Takizawa style. Like if he tries to take you down, just do whatever it takes to get out of there. Because if you go down, you're never getting back up.
Not just because he was my client and still one of my good friends, but Mizugaki was the classic type of striker who was very good at takedown defense. I mean, this kid has almost no ground game, right?
Yeah.
But he was smart enough to go to, you know what was so funny was that when we discussed about his wrestling training, Mizugaki chose to go to Komazawa University, which is not a powerhouse wrestling school at all. In fact, in terms of wrestling, college wrestling, they're like second rate. Okay. But he decided to do that because after he actually saw what Frankie Edgar did, Frankie Edgar actually chose Rutgers University to do wrestling training back then. And Frankie chose that wrestling because he wanted to learn the technique that he could use for MMA. It's not like he's going to go and beat the wrestlers. Right. He's not going to go there to try to pin the guy. That's not the skill that he wants to learn. Now, when you go to wrestling powerhouse, you just get beat up, and
it's almost it'd almost be like overwhelming and worthless. It's like, oh, what happened today? I got taken down 50 times.
Exactly. But if you go to Soko, I would say second rate, but more little loose wrestling team. Teammates are more cooperative. They'll teach you. They'll be more interesting MMA. It will be much better environment, and I totally agree. And I think Mizugaki learned that from Frankie Edgar, and that's why he chose Komazawa University. So, to go back to a guy like Kubo or Suzuki, I get it. I mean, Miyata is a great coach. He's a great wrestler, but it's not like if you go to the great wrestler, you get the skills you really need to be a successful MMA fighter. They have to think about that, right?
Yeah, because if I was Kubo, I would almost be like, you should go train with someone like Krokop.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, how did you learn to not get taken down?
Right. I mean, the key word is this. Len Hiramoto arrived in Duke Rufus's team last week, and I had the long talk with Duke, and this is the first thing Duke said. You know, shoot, we're not going to teach him BJJ. We're going to teach him combat wrestling. You know, hold a guy, beat him up, don't make him move. You know, like you have to learn how to win within the RIZIN rules, utilizing your best skill, right?
Yeah.
So why do you bother like try to learn BJJ? But in Japan, like Choi Hagura's, I'm going to BJJ school. You know, you have to learn BJJ. I get it, but of course, that it's going to take years to catch up, right? So
I always remember an old Eddie Bravo interview where he talked about training like strikers, bringing him in to bring their jiu-jitsu coaches, and he was just always like, "Do your striking stuff. Like you're a striker,
right?
You're not a jiu-jitsu guy.
Exactly.
My whole goal is to not get you submitted by the next fight, so that we can keep working on your jiu-jitsu and keep working on it.
Right.
But do not be confused. You're not a jiu-jitsu fighter.
Exactly. Like Adesanya will not pull guard. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
So I mean, that's what I wish. I mean, I think in a way, Japanese are too. I don't know what's the word, but like if you want to go to Harvard University, you get taught by Harvard University graduate. You know, kind of stuff like.
Oh, they attach like a lot of value to like the name of who you're learning under.
Exactly, but you always have to look at what you really need to learn. I think, you know.
Right. Because I mean, you'd think if you're Kubo, just put on a bunch of Pro Cop and Chuck Liddell tapes and be like, I need to learn to just sprawl and not get taken down. I don't need to learn how to do a cradle roll or like a granny roll.
So what they should be learning is just not get taken down. If they happen to get taken down, get up in 30 seconds. That's the I think they need to learn, I think.
Exactly. You know? And I mean, you'd maybe like a good gym for him. I mean, I know he's not that serious. He's like admitted this is just like a thing to get his wife's career off the ground. But like TriStar, I mean, a lot of those guys got good at wrestling, and none of them had collegiate wrestling history. So something like that, or I just don't think training with an Olympian is going to be that helpful to you, because the Olympian's going to be used to teaching people that have been doing wrestling for 20 years.
Exactly, right.
But I will say, watching Kubo hit the heavy pad, he hits really hard. Like really hard. And I'm like, if he's able to get a couple of those off, fight could be over.
Right. But here's what it is. Every predictions I hear about, like from fighters or critics about the RIZIN, they always say, well, you know, Kintaro has this power or Kubo has this tricks. If he lands one punch, you don't. It's the same for everybody. This is a fall-on glove. You're a skilled fighter. If you land, it will fall. You know, like.
Well, I know that Ota is a Greco-Roman wrestler, but I'm just like having flashbacks in my mind of Randy Couture versus James Toney, just like shooting into the single leg from super far out. I'm like, if he's smart, he's just gonna do some very basic wrestling move to avoid any damage and get him down as quick as possible.
Right, and remember, even though he was a Greco-Roman, he was competing as a freestyle wrestler through high school. And I'm telling you right now, when you're at that level, I'm pretty sure he trained freestyle wrestling too. So
yeah, exactly. I mean,
that technique has to be up there, right?
What is the lowest risk takedown I could do? I expect him to shoot from so far away to try to get him down.
Exactly. That's what I would do if I Ota. This would be an easy fight for Ota if he plays smart.
Right. I think the only way that Ota loses is if he gets caught coming in.
Right. But anyway, to finish our episode, let's go to our favorite topic of Rin Nakai going off on Twitter again.
It's been a good week for her on Twitter.
Oh, Jesus.
I will say that the biggest reveal. So to pick up our trend, Rin Nakai for years has been maintaining that people are out to get her, that people are preventing sparring partners from coming to train with her, that people are preventing her from getting fight offers, things like that. And then she recently has been like trying to accuse specific people on Twitter, I believe. And one of them is a guy that's like he works for a ticket reselling company.
I think he's the president of a ticket reselling company. He's like owner president.
Who's I think he has like 7,000 or 8,000 followers on Twitter. He's a pretty popular guy.
Yes, and because you actually get on the pro wrestling ring and stuff like that too. So he's actually a character, you know.
And I think it's funny because I think she thought that she would like cause him to like apologize or something. He just does not care.
Oh, he doesn't care. He doesn't care.
The fatal blow in all of this is that Rin Nakai took a screenshot of a blog post. And in the screenshot, she didn't do the thing where you drag and click. She just did an entire screenshot, and it revealed what the bookmarks are on her internet. And they're all related to Kana Watanabe and Kana Watanabe's coach. And so it's like, oh, so like Rin Nakai / Usami, because let's be realistic, is obsessed with Kana Watanabe for some reason.
Obsessed, yeah.
And it's like, why? First off, why do you have to bookmark her Twitter page? Like, do you not know how to use Twitter? Just type in the first letter of her name and you'll find her page.
A bookmark like a search engine too, right? Kana 2 or Takao Ueda 1, whatever that is, yeah.
And this also is kind of damning because there's been allegations made that Usami writes all of these tweets.
Yes.
And that one piece of evidence used is that there's all these blog posts and there's this guy that writes like super negative comments about Kana Watanabe on these forums, and people think it's Usami.
Right, same kind of wording he used.
Yeah, exactly. He says that Usami and Rin Nakai don't speak like normal Japanese. They kind of speak older. They use particular words that are strange.
Right.
And this blog posts are the same, and they make the same spelling mistakes.
Right.
And
oh no, this is Usami. It can't be Rin Nakai.
And so he deleted the tweet, but everyone else screenshotted it. And so it's just like, oh, look at Usami's talking about how he's being slandered, but he's out here slandering Kana Watanabe all the time.
You know what? This is what I think. First of all, most of the tweeters he tweets is like between 1 a.m. and 3 a.m., right?
Yeah.
It's like 16 times.
It's also like, it's an insane amount of tweets. He'll like go on like a 20 tweet rant.
Exactly. But here's what it is. But a couple hours before that, they tweet something like, oh, I train 4 times a day, 8 hours. You know, when you really think about 8-hour training, eating, you know, rest your body, body care, why the hell she's up between 1 to 3 tweeting?
Yeah.
When does she go to sleep?
Also, does she think she's special? I mean, didn't Mizuki say she trained for like 9 hours a day back when she was training in Japan?
Yeah. Right. And the funniest thing is, did you see the most recent one? Is some fan out in Brazil tweeted and said, Beth Correa wants to fight?
Someone told me about this.
Okay, what is it?
And then Rin Nakai like wrote back in broken English, like, we're not in the same division. There you go. Let me fight in the UFC. And I was laughing because Betch Carrera's next fight is her retirement fight.
Right. And it's against Carol Rosa, which is our client.
Yeah.
At 135.
Because I think Betch Carrera's contract ran out and they originally weren't going to re-sign her. I think they re-signed her to like a 1-fight contract for her retirement fight.
Retirement fight.
Yeah, and so I'm just like, why are they bringing up Betch Carrera? Also, why is Rin Nakai being picky? If you're so obsessed to go to the UFC, if someone was going to offer you a fight, why wouldn't you just take it?
Exactly. Even though 135, fine. Just like we did with Mizuki, she could do one fight and go down to 125. See, sign
the contract. Sign the contract, hurt your knee in training, then come back at 125.
Exactly. The problem is this. It's obvious. This is like clear sign that the Nakai and Usami and whoever around him has zero idea what's going on in the MMA world. Right? Like how they didn't even know it was Carrera's retirement fight. They didn't know it's always a multi-fight deal, so you can fight at 135, you can still go down to 125, you know, all kinds of stuff. Like they have zero idea what's going on, obviously.
Yeah. They have no idea. And it's also like, this isn't the way to get, I mean, do you think the UFC is reading these tweets?
Not at all. Not this one just fan with like 5 followers. I don't think so.
Maybe an intern in the UFC's marketing department read this tweet, but that's probably the highest it reached, if that high at all. Yeah, email them. I mean, you've made it very clear. Just email them.
Right.
Contact the UFC directly.
Matchmaker. What the hell is she doing is my point. And the bottom line is like, then if they're going to do that, they should tag Mick Maynard. Which I don't even think they know that Mick is the matchmaker. It's still the truth.
Sean, what is it? Joe Silva is still getting a bunch of emails from
Maybe
Usami.
they're sending an email to Joe Silva. Who knows?
But also, it just seems weird to me because what I think would be funny was Sayaki-san from Deep said he wants to put on a women's flyweight tournament next year.
Right.
And I'm like, he should include her name.
Oh yeah, of course.
In every time he talks about it.
Yeah.
And make it very obvious that he wants her to be part of it.
Right.
They've invited her because I just want to see what her reaction is.
Right. And he should openly offer her fight or spot, whatever. You know?
Just openly offer her fights repeatedly. And just say, like, it's not scheduled yet. So whenever you're available, just like put the ball in her court because I want to see what her reaction is.
Well, but according to her Twitter, she has this management company who's been talking to a promotion outside of Japan for a month. I don't know how many months they've been talking, but that's what they say. So
yeah, okay. Not like I don't know why you'd have to talk for a month. I mean, it seems very easy to me. If I've never been a manager, but wouldn't it just unless you're Fedor and you're meeting with Lorenzo Fertitta on an island in Russia to talk about fighting at UFC 100 or something?
Right.
I don't know why it would take more than one phone call.
Right. Or one email to tell the truth.
Yeah.
It's nothing hard, you know?
Yeah.
And I have a feeling, you know, she's going to end up doing this to the end of her career.
Yeah, they seem to really embrace this whole victim mentality. And I wonder if it's just if every tweet they do this, they get a bunch of presents from her fans. But it seems like a giant pity party almost.
Well, beggars can't be a chooser.
But
I mean, they don't have to understand that.
So I just think Sayaki should just openly offer her fights and see what she says.
Right. You know, that's too bad though. How old is she now? I mean, she can't be that young anymore.
She's not that young, but she's also not as old as you would think she is because she's been around for a long time. I want to say she's in her early 30s. Hold on, I'll pull it up.
You know, if she really
never mind. She's 34, so I mean she's getting near the end.
Well, here's what it is. If she's so upset with Kana Watanabe, her choice is clear. Call Scott Coker. Call Mike Colgan, whatever. I mean, reach out to Bellator. Why can't she do that?
Or it's just like that fight could have happened, and it's only didn't happen because of you.
Exactly, not because of her, right?
Yeah. I mean, didn't Kana Watanabe give up going to the UFC for a chance to fight Rin Nakai?
Right. Now she waited it until Mr. Usami's condition gets better. She's not going to wait. Of course she takes the chance from Bellator. You know?
And, I mean, Kana Watanabe's kind of put it behind her, and I think if Rin Nakai was smart, she'd do it too.
Right, exactly. The point is, Rin Nakai is not Kana's problem. Who cares, right?
I mean, if I was Kana, I'd almost be scared. It's like, why do these people have all my social media accounts bookmarked?
Oh, I know. It's like almost a stalker, right?
Exactly.
She should maybe consult with the police.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like, do you want crazy long-haired Usami flying up from Shikoku to find you? That'd be weird.
Right. I mean, but again, I have to say this at the end. If I were a kancho of the dojo, like the owner of the dojo, and if I'm really getting a slander or like problem with the businesses, I will create dojo account and talking from that account, not from one of my fighters' account. I don't understand that mentality at all.
Also, right? I will say I brought something up to your attention because, I mean, one of the slips, there's a tweet where Rin Nakai essentially said, "I'm the owner of the gym, and Usami-san is the director," and all this stuff. And it's like, wait a minute, is Usami like getting confused who he's writing as when he writes these tweets now?
Tweets on he and she and I too, yeah, obviously.
He's like, is he like describing himself, but because it's Rin Nakai's account, it like sounds like she's saying she owns Usami's gym or something. It's like, oh, like you're starting to reveal some cracks in the line.
I'm going to be very harsh about that. All right, let's say technically, right? Which I doubt it, but let's say technically Rin owns that gym, right? But still, Kancho is Usami. If you keep calling him Kancho, that's the head, right? That's the guy who takes responsibility. He is the one who is the top of that organization. Publicly. Right.
I will say, on an interesting side note, it is nice to see fighters like Emi Fujino introducing her husband in the RIZIN confession videos.
Sure. Right.
Because 10 years ago, a female fighter, the only female fighter in Japan that I knew that was like, "This is my husband," was Hitomi Akano. Was the only person that didn't care if you knew who her husband was.
Exactly, right.
And every other fighter, I mean, Megumi Fuji was like probably dating Sasaki for years. No, never told anybody about it.
Told anyone.
Rena won't tell anyone who her boyfriend is, despite tabloids showing who it is. So it's nice to see fighters just being like, "Yeah, I'm married.
Right,
This
why
is
not?
my husband."
It's not a big deal. They're not idol singers.
Yeah, so it'd almost be nice if Rin Nakai and Usami-san were just like, "We're married."
Exactly, right. But again, that's I guess that's their choice, so it's not much we can do, you know.
But it's like such an obvious farce for they lash out like, "People are accusing us of being married. We're not married." It's like, okay, whatever you say.
Yeah, I know, but it's too bad. The point is, like, again, I guess she's constantly giving us a topic to talk about, which is actually
exactly
very amusing, and maybe we can start putting wagers or odds on see when is she going to actually fight.
Like an under/over poll going on.
Right,
5 years, under or over 5 years.
Right, I don't think she'll fight this year, obviously, right?
No.
Is she ever going to fight next year? You know,
who knows? God, and then did you watch the RIZIN confession videos on speaking on people we like to talk about, Kubo?
Oh, Kubo's wife. Yeah, I saw that.
I'm like, yep, that's why they signed him. This is exactly why they signed him. This is amazing content.
Oh, I know, but I mean, as a man's point of view, I guess everybody has different taste. But what does he see in her except the fact that she's a rich girl?
Okay, so I feel like it's all an act. I don't know if it's real. This is my problem.
They live together, right? On the real life.
Yeah, the video makes it seem like they don't live together.
Right.
B, while he's cutting weight, she's eating a giant meal in front of him.
Right.
And he just seems like she walks all over him and everything he does.
Right. All over.
And my whole thing is like, they got divorced, but did they get back together just because she wants to be? It seems like to me like she wants to be famous.
Right.
Like she wants to be Kim Kardashian, essentially, like Desperate Housewives or whatever those TV shows are.
Right.
And it's just like, oh, I have a famous husband. If I have him in the pictures with me, people will take notice.
Exactly. And he was driving Ferrari too. Huh?
Yeah. He was driving a Ferrari. He had his pet monkey. He had like his giant computer screen set up where I think he did his investments.
Right. And he's doing trading and stuff like that too, right?
Yeah. And then like there's that, did you see that part where she was talking about how she got like all horny and worked up watching him grappling Mikuru Asakura?
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah. I mean,
I was just like, what?
She wanted to do an adult video, right?
I was just like, what is she saying? I'm like, what the hell is she saying? Like, this is insane stuff. But I mean, RIZIN's smart. It's gold. I think it's like reality show television.
Right, yeah, exactly. But I mean, I guess I'm like old school, and by watching a guy like that, to me, he looks such a wimpy, right? Of course,
exactly.
He's not a wimp. He's a good fighter and stuff, you know. But God, like, where's your like a man stuff going on here?
Yeah, you know? Part of me wants to be like, stand up for yourself. Like, don't take this.
He's like a butler slash like a host slash almost like a slave, right?
Yeah. It seems so strange. Like the fact that they live separately.
That could be all act too. Who knows? Then that's brilliant if they are, right?
If it's all an act, it's brilliant. If it's not an act, it's really sad and depressing.
Exactly. But this is when the comparison to Rin Nakai and Usami, I think they're much more smart in that sense, you know? Going
back to the wives and the husbands, I might have a little story. I remember I went to, I think it was Deep Jewels 15. For those who like women's MMA, Jewels 15 was a stacked card. It had Megumi Fuji, Ham Sohei, Vivi May, Roxanne Modafari, Hitomi Akano. Like everybody was on this card, and it was big, so I went. And after Hitomi Akano beat Roxanne Modafari, and after the fight, Hitomi Akano's in the hallway, and her husband was with her, and he was just like telling people, he's like so proud. He was like, "I'm her husband." Well, he was like beaming with a giant smile, like, "I'm her husband."
Well, here's what it is.
So out of place.
Right, Hitomi's husband is actually a head coach of the very famous judo school. So he's like a proud judo man. And I used to manage Hitomi, and they're great people. And I actually even cornered with him when he told me he fought in Los Angeles, and he's such a Japanese guy that I'm telling you, I mean, he's a good guy, but he lectures his wife too about the philosophy. And yeah, and
Did
actually,
you see that? That sounds exactly like the RIZIN confession video where Fujino's husband is just like yelling at her in the rounds about how to fight and everything.
No, but no, the way he's not actually not lecturing, but he talks to her. You know, he doesn't yell nothing, but he talks to her for like an hours. And
maybe it's interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting. But he does say the right thing, and he's interesting thing, so it's good. But a very interesting episode is that on the debut fight, Akana fought, I believe, Yabushita, and she lost. And he actually talked to her for all night long about the loss, and you have to come back and win for the judo world and da da da. But he's a great motivator,
Maybe it's a judo thing because I'm happy that they're marketing these people for who they actually are. Because in Deep Jewels now there's Saudi Oshima, and she's been in judo for like over 20 years. She actually used to train with Kana Watanabe, and her husband's also a judo guy.
Sure.
So maybe it's the judo angle. These judo guys that get married don't care, as opposed to the other people.
But the problem is, like, I guess women judo is much more seems lenient with the Japanese judo promotion, because like guy like Makoto Takimoto got banned and took him years to get back to judo.
Yeah.
Ishii's banned; he can't do anything with the judo.
During the Olympics, what's his name? Yoshida was doing a commentary.
Right.
And I was kind of surprised because he was blacklisted from judo for a very long time.
It took him a while to get him back, basically.
And it's kind of crazy to me because he's such a big deal for judo to be like, no, we don't need you. It's kind of a crazy thing to me.
But you know what? I know for this that Yoshida is also a master of scoring a big sponsor.
Right. I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like, why wouldn't you have him involved? Also, another thing was Miyu Yamamoto also did commentary for the Olympics.
Right.
I don't know if we said that.
But
I have never noticed. Yeah. Wrestling doesn't have any of that. They don't care if people go to MMA. Whereas judo, it's like you're giving up, because a successful judo person can make a living in judo in Japan for the rest of their life.
Exactly.
And to go to MMA, you're like throwing all of that away.
Exactly right. Right. So I mean, the point is, like, successful judoka usually don't go to MMA, and if you go to MMA, judo world will consider you as a betrayal. That's the problem. So
because Yoshida, it's like it's a gold medalist Olympic judoka.
Right.
He's essentially a god in Japan.
And also, he was a Pride star who beat Naoya Ogawa, which is another big name pro wrestler / judoka. So I mean, in terms of judo world, nobody's bigger name than him.
Also, because I feel like, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like Olympic gold medalists are a bigger deal in Japan than like in the United States. Because if you're an Olympic gold medalist, I mean, you have TV gigs. You're on like reality shows in Japan. Right. You're doing variety shows.
Bigger deal, because in America, there's so many gold medal winners. If you win gold medal, even in wrestling, unless if you're, like some kind of personality, you don't really get a big spot.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't get a coin.
Like you enjoy your 15 minutes of fame. You go on Ellen DeGeneres, and then you go to college, and no one ever hears from you again.
Exactly right. So, but again, in judo in Japan, it's a big thing. It's a big deal. Yeah. I mean, that's the one sport probably score the most gold medals, right, in every Olympics.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the pride of Japan, I think, pretty much. Yeah, but Yoshida does not have to work. I don't think so. He's always have a very good sponsor. Like, for example, those little parking spot all over the Tokyo where you go walk in and just put a coin parking?
Yeah.
That big company is Yoshida's one of the big sponsors.
Yeah, and I think he worked his way back in because I think he's actually coaching a pretty prestigious team now, because I think Wolf is one of his students.
Yeah. So I think he has those big networks, so he had ability to politically work his way back into judo, I think.
Plus, I mean, it's funny now because you have to imagine, I imagine so many of those contacts actually come from his Pride success. Because of Pride skyrocketed his name too. So it's funny that they reject his time in Pride, but now they're kind of reaping the benefits of it through the sponsorships.
And I mean, Charlie, do you go to a sauna in Japan? Like the Japanese people loves those saunas, like high-end.
Like the onsens?
Yeah, like an onsen, or like, I'm talking about like a sauna, like high-end saunas in Shinjuku or Rakuba, Korakuen. Do you go to those places?
No, I actually live like in Yokohama, so I don't go to Tokyo that often.
Actually, those high-end sauna places are the places you do bump into a very high-end businessman. So actually, this is old days, but a guy like even Antonio Inoki in the younger days, he used to hang out at the sauna so he can meet the successful businessman.
That's smart though. You gotta hang out where they are.
And the very last time I actually bumped into Mr. Yoshida was at the sauna in Shimbashi. I was there. He's like, "Oh, hey, how are you?" He was with one of the business president. So we all talked buck naked and stuff like that.
It's like the Japanese golf course. All the business deals are done in the sauna.
Yeah. So it is a sauna. High-end sauna is the place to go sometimes, especially for the athletes.
It's hilarious. It makes sense though.
It is. It does make sense. All right. Well, anyway, so let's finish. We did it for an hour and a half now. So
yep.
All right, so we'll go back in 2 weeks.
Yep, sounds good.
Yeah.
We will have a lot to talk about.
Yeah, have a nice day.
Yep, have a nice day.
All right, see you later. Bye-bye.